Hi, my name is Jamie Rattray and I play for the Canadian women's national team. I grew up probably learning how to skate almost right after I learned how to walk. My dad played hockey growing up, so I guess when I was 3 or 4 years old, I was in the rink with my mom watching him and turned to her and said, I want to play hockey just like my dad, and they signed me up the next winter and off I went. And I probably spent all of my free time out playing road hockey or playing pond hockey with my friends. And as I got into it more, I just really enjoyed going to the rink and mostly being with my teammates. I think that's kind of, the aspect of every team sport is just being around the team, and you instantly have like 20 best friends. What it's taught me is, especially in a team sport, is how to be a good teammate, how to, share, how to be, competitive. I think that's really important. But I think the biggest thing for me is just, still having fun with it. I think, the whole aspect of sport is still wanting to do it for fun. I think as a kid, I enjoyed playing hockey. I wanted to do it all the time, but I also took, long periods of time doing other sports. I think you got to make sure it's still fun and not becoming a job, because if it gets to that point, I think, that's when you can kind of get sick of it. And I've been really fortunate in my career that it's still fun and I still enjoyed going to the office every day, which is a hockey rink. I went to university with a big class. We had a high expectation. We end up losing the most games in Clarkson history in my first year. And I think that's something that really taught me adversity and how to kind of, bounce back and build something and stay together. I think sometimes, we want to hit the panic button and move on. But I think the cool thing is by the end of my 4 years there, we were national champions with the same group. And, that's something that taught me that, adversity can be a good thing. I think just surround yourself with some really good people and take the bumps as they go. One challenge for me, I think the biggest one that sticks out in my career is being released right before centralization for the tryout for the Olympic team. A couple years before I had been a part of the team, I went to a couple world championships. So my goal was to eventually make the 2018 Olympic team. And I remember sitting in my car waiting for my phone call in 2017, and they had let me know that I wasn't going to participate in that tryout. And it was really hard to hear as an athlete. I think you put so much work into one thing and so much focus that, obviously it was devastating for me. But the next year I decided to, continue to play and just focus on what I had to do to, get to that next level, what I could control. And fortunately for me, I think in the end, it was a blessing in disguise. I think I learned, what I needed to work on as an athlete, but also as a player. And fortunately for me, I was back on the team in 2019 and was able to make that next Olympic team in 2022. I mean, making to the Olympics is, the biggest pinnacle of sport, I think. And then especially in the women's side of hockey, that's kind of our Stanley Cup right now. And, I've been on the national team, at that time for 8 years, and I've been made to a couple world championships and things like that. So to finally make that Olympic roster kind of felt, amazing and very surreal. And sometimes I actually look back on the pictures and can't really believe that it actually happened. But I think the coolest part for me was, getting in the Olympic Village and just seeing everybody in their colors from every country, every different sport. It didn't matter what sport you're in. You worked so hard to get to that moment, whether you were a first-time Olympian, two-time Olympian. That was the coolest thing for me. And I think the biggest, issue with our game and on the women's side, I mean, it could be any sport, but I think for hockey especially is visibility. And I think if you can see it, you can be it. And I think social media is such a big thing now. You have young girls who have it. You have the younger generation all have social media. So the more we can kind of push it out there and push our own brands, I think the more we can kind of grow our game. And in reality, that's all we really need, I think, is visibility and people that want to, to buy a ticket, to watch. And I think it's really, really important to, show the young girls that, it doesn't matter where you're coming from or, you can do whatever you want, whether it's a sport, whether it's, in business or anything. I think it's really important to have representation in kind of all aspects. And I think, I've had some really great role models in my life, and, it's really, really important to say that maybe I can influence maybe one person, in my career. I think that I'll take that as a win, because I think, I was fortunate enough to have a lot of those growing up. And speaking about visibility, I think, especially in the LGBTQ plus community right now, I think, we do want hockey to be for everyone. We want everyone to be able to, whether you're a player, a fan, a coach, you want to be able to come to the rink with confidence. And I think with me, I've been very fortunate to have some really great teammates, some great coaches, some great mentors that have never made me feel not confident in my own skin. And I think the more people we can see in the game that are, represented in that community, I think it's important. And for the young people growing up and playing the sport, I think they need to know that, it is a place for you to come and, feel welcome. And the more we can, make sure that people are feeling included, I think the, better we are. I think for us, the biggest thing, our biggest challenge is obviously visibility, I think, and the marketing and the funding. I think once, we get our product out there, and, you see it at the Olympics every year. We're one of the most watched games, in all of the Olympics. So we're obviously doing something right with the product. And I think it's going to be really cool in 10 to 15 years when I'm maybe retired, or, looking back and say, hey, I had a little piece in growing the game. And that's really all we're trying to do, is just leave the game better than we found it. And I see girls on the rosters of the PA, and, they're full-time teachers and cops and firefighters. And how cool is it going to be when the girls don't have to worry about that? They can just, make a decision to play hockey as a living. And I think it's going to happen really soon, and I hope it does. The word grit for me, I think, is perseverance, hard work. I think you have to have a lot of grit to get through life sometimes. And I think it's a good representation of not every day is going to be easy. Some days are easier than others, but I think a lot of us, I'm sure in any aspect of life, whether it's sport or not, I think we've all had to use our grit one way or another. I think in the early years of my career, I was busy trying to, compare or look around and, what other people were doing. In reality, that's not really what we want to look at. It's what you can control and what you can do. And that's really all you can do as an athlete is, put in the effort where you want it. And if it works out, then, in the end that it was worth it. Finding things that really bring you joy, I think, is something that, keeps yourself authentic and makes you unique to you. So that can be anything, whatever you really do enjoy. But I think it's important to, not veer too much off that, especially if you're on a team sport. I think sometimes, you can be unique to yourself, and you can bring a lot to a team if you do stay that way. My favorite chocolate is peanut M&Ms because they're amazing. My favorite hobby is boating. I have a cottage, so in the summers I spend tons of time up there and on the boat. My favorite genre to get me going for the game is probably rap, Eminem, Cinderella Man, my favorite song. My favorite movie, I think, is Shawshank Redemption. Just an awesome movie all around. My favorite thing about my hometown, Ottawa, Ontario, is the beaver tails and the Rideau Canal, because as a kid, there's nothing better than a hot chocolate and a beaver tail while you're skating the canal.